We need to convince the millions of avid recyclers in California and beyond, that the people that care so much about this, we need to convince them to move beyond making change in their kitchens to making change in their communities. There's this weird gap out there in the world. If you look at the data about how many people recycle, how many people care about these issues, it's really, really high. Mayor Kwan said 85% of people in Oakland believe that being sustainable is a priority. 74% of people want stricter regulations about toxic chemicals and products. Like, we have the numbers of support, but we have not been able to translate those numbers of support into political action. I mean, these are such high numbers of support. I want you to really think about this for a second. We have higher numbers of support for the issues we care about than Martin Luther King had in the civil rights movement, than the abolitionists had in fighting slavery, than women had in fighting for the right to vote. We have enormous levels of support. If we can turn that support into political action, we can build the power to change the rules to facilitate that last slide into zero waste. Political power, we need to keep recalibrating our strategies based on the one big goal, which is reducing the volume and toxicity of stuff moving through our economy. Increased diversion is a mighty powerful tool in our toolbox, but it's certainly not the only one. So let's keep increasing diversion, but let's also keep expanding the tools in that toolbox. Now, the third thing that I learned that I'd like to share with all of you is that we need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. We need to really embrace discomfort. So here's the deal. You guys have led communities across California to approach and sometimes even exceed 50 or 75% diversion. That is freaking great. That is really, really great. But after 75%, we're getting into a less comfortable zone. To get closer to zero, we need to start bringing up some issues that are less comfortable to talk about than source separation is. We've got to embrace and not shy away from that. An ecologist friend of mine told me that the most exciting environments where the most activity happens is on the edge of two ecosystem zones where they're just merging. Once we get past 75% diversion, we are on the edge of all these other movements and discussions that are happening. We're on the edge of a burgeoning conversation about what's fundamentally wrong with our economy and what needs to be rethought and redesigned. It's unfamiliar territory for a lot of zero waste and recycling advocates. But if we engage here, if we embrace that, we not only can make greater change, but we'll also find many, many diverse new allies. Let me just give you a couple of examples. One is the issue of economic growth. This is an uncomfortable issue to question in a lot of settings, but we must, for a number of reasons. It's increasingly clear that infinite economic growth is simply not possible on a finite planet, and it's simply not compatible with zero waste. Furthermore, the link between growth and well-being is increasingly dubious. After a point, once we all have roofs on our head and food in our stomachs, and after we have our basic needs met, at a point, more and better part ways. The way that we measure growth is also being heavily critiqued. We count only economic transactions as growth. We don't count unpaid work and volunteerism. We don't count the quality of our social fabric, the level of education of our children. We don't count the many ecosystem services that a healthy environment provides. And we count positives and negatives the exact same way. So a new prison, or an oil spill, or every new case of cancer adds to economic growth, and it adds to the growth tally, just the same as a new school or a zero waste center would. So we don't distinguish between those economic activities that indicate and contribute a healthy economy versus those that indicate and undermine, indicate and contribute to an unhealthy society. So this is a tough conversation to talk about growth. To question our metrics and to question our goals around growth is almost sacrilege in this country. We risk being called un-American or appearing insensitive to the economic suffering of many. I started questioning growth, and Glenn Beck attacked me every single day for 2 weeks on his television show. He said that I was actually spreading communism and anti-Americanism through the guise of recycling. But it's important that we realize that even if it's uncomfortable to talk about, we simply cannot get to zero waste in a country whose sole measure of success is growth in a consumer-based economy. There is a fundamental inconsistency there. We need to rethink how we run our economy. We need to ask, as so many are doing, what's the economy for anyway? That's the title of an excellent new book. What's the economy for anyway? Is the economy to serve infinite growth, Or is the economy to serve people and the planet, and growth is one strategy among many that sometimes helps us to achieve those real goals? Fortunately, there's a vibrant discussion exploding all over this country. There's a great umbrella organization that hosts a lot of these conversations. It's called the New Economy Network. You can check them out online. I encourage all of us to get involved in that conversation. We have much to learn, but we also have much to offer to that conversation. Another issue that's often uncomfortable to talk about is subsidies. As we explored in our film, The Story of Broke, which I hope you've seen, at the same time that we're being told that we're too broke to invest in a better future, we're too broke to have good schools and a strong environmental protection agency and better paid zero waste coordinators in every city in the country. We're too broke for that, but we are dishing tons of money, billions and billions of dollars out to the already very full coffers of oil companies. We are now using taxpayer money to clean up Superfund sites. I thought the whole point of Superfund was to get the polluters to pay, but we're now supplementing that with our hard-earned taxpayer dollars. And really outrageously, we're using our taxpayer dollars to subsidize a resurgence in incineration, which has Orwellianly been renamed as renewable energy. I mean, these are all absolute outrages that our taxpayer money is being spent in ways that prop up the dinosaur economy rather than build a better future. So we've got to start talking about government subsidies. So rethinking economic growth, growth of what? Redeploying public subsidies. There's other issues too that we need to get involved in. Chemical policy reform, issues of equity and social justice, and the very important one that Mayor Kwan referred to, which is the influence of corporations in our democracy. Corporations have hijacked our democratic process, and that is a fundamental obstacle to advancing policies that protect health and the environment. So we need to get the corporations out of our democracy, and then we need to get the people back in. That last point is really important about getting the people back in, because there are a number of these problems that we can solve with our individual or our consumer or our recycling hats on. There are a number of these problems that we cannot solve unless we step into our role as citizens, unless we engage in the political process, exercise our citizen muscles, and build the power to take this country back and get it back on track towards sustainability. I want to end with a note about change, and that's the theme of this conference. It's a big word in our public discourse these days. People often ask me, do I think change is possible? And I always answer, duh, of course change is possible. We are using 1.5 planets worth of resources each year and creating 1.5 times the amount of waste that the planet can assimilate. One cannot use 1.5 planets indefinitely when you only have one. Of course change is possible. It's not just possible, it is inevitable. We are definitely going to change. The question is not if we are going to change, it is how we are going to change, because change is definitely coming. Are we going to change by design, or are we going to change by disaster? If we do it by design, as all of you are at the forefront of doing, it's still going to be hard work, as you well know, but we can be so much more strategic and compassionate and intelligent about that change. If we dig our heels in, as our former president said, that the American way of life is non-negotiable, if we refuse to look at the facts, if we refuse to take back our democracy and get it back on track, we are still going to change, but we're going to hit an ecological limits wall. The change is going to be a lot more violent, a lot more ugly, a lot less just. It's kind of like the car is changing directions, and we have a choice. We can either be at the steering wheel and chart that new direction, or we can be on the road and get run over. But either way, change is coming. So the question's not if, it's how we're going to change. And when I look out at all the CRRA members all around the state and all that you are doing, and the additional work that you're inspiring, from Boston to Borneo, like all over the world, the work that has been inspired because of you, I am incredibly confident that we are going to change by design. You guys give me hope. Zero waste is a key part of the journey. Zero waste is a key part of making that change by design. I am so enormously grateful to be on this journey with all of you. Thank you so much. Talk about zero waste all the time. How great to be at a conference where we have discussions about, the joys and surprises of organics and clean versus dirty MRFs. It's like, So happy. So I guess we have time for a couple of comments or questions or anything. And let me also tell you too, while I have this microphone, we now, I think a lot of you have seen the Story of Stuff, we now have 8 movies. They're all available free to watch at storyofstuff.org. We also have curriculums and study guides for educators, as well as for faith-based communities. Those are the 2 communities that responded so enthusiastically to the Story of Stuff. So those are all available to download. I have a book, The Story of Stuff, and we also now have a podcast series. The #1 question we get from people who write into the Story of Stuff is, what can I do? People say, I'm only one person, what can I do? And I always say, well, first of all, make a friend, because then you'll be 2 people, so you've already magnified your voice, and then you can start making some change. But we have a new podcast series called The Good Stuff, and this focuses on regular people who have made a difference in their community, from promoting zero waste, to banning plastic bags, to getting virgin fiber out of fast food packaging, a whole bunch of things. So check it all out on our website, and there's a little Join Our Community button. If you click that, we'll let you know as we make new films. Our latest film is The Story of Change, about how we need to work together to create broad-scale change. And then our next film, which will be coming out next year, is The Story of Solutions. And that, zero waste, will be in that, I promise you. Yes, Carrie Liss.
Alan Hershkowitz at the National Zero Waste Business Conference said Alan Hershkowitz at the National Zero Waste Business Conference highlighted that there were 3 key agents for change in America that they were looking at to try to influence. Sports, entertainment, and religion. He worked to form the Green Sports Alliance. You just talked about faith-based initiatives. If you could elaborate on that, and what and who are the key actors in the faith-based initiatives that we should align ourselves with for the change of the culture to zero waste and in the entertainment industry.
Those are 3 agents for change. I'd say the #1 agent for change is engaged citizens. That is the most important thing, and in many issues that are so important today, that's the one thing that we're missing. So I just add to Alan's list, the #1 thing that we need is more engaged citizens, and that's where all of us come in. Even if you work for a local municipality and your role as engaged citizens is limited in your job, you got a lot of other hours in the day. We need to start engaging our citizen muscles to make some real change in this country. One of the lessons, if you look back at successful social movements through history, and what we're talking about here, what we really need is a social movement. We are talking about large-scale social, economic, and structural change. It's a social movement that we are part of. It's not just a technical thing. We are building a social movement for a sustainable and just society, and zero waste is so key. So one of the lessons from successful social movements is that the social movement leaders have aligned with and utilized the existing structures in society. Now this is something that a lot of the environmental community has not fully leveraged over time. We try to create all our own new structures and new institutions and new conversations where there already are things like sports and religion and entertainment where people are already talking to each other. So we need to align with and leverage those. Faith-based communities have become real leaders on environmental issues. I have to tell you that I was surprised when we started getting all these letters from faith-based communities. We get all these cute handwritten notes from nuns who can't figure out how to download the film. They're like, you can look at the envelope and we can tell it's from a nun, just from their little scribbly writing. And so they can't figure out how to download it, and they're asking for a DVD. Faith communities were not even on my radar screen when I made this film, and we have literally gotten tens of thousands of requests from faith-based communities for more information. It's not my background, so I didn't know how to have that conversation. So we started a little survey of who in the faith community is doing this kind of work, and there are so many. There are groups like Restoring Eden and Creation Care. There's one called Building in Good Faith that looks on green building material in constructing new churches and synagogues. The one that we partnered with is called Green Faith. And the reason we chose them is that they're interdenominational. They work with all different faith-based communities. And we worked with them, we created a 6-week study and action guide. It's geared mostly for teenagers, but it can be used for anyone in a faith-based community, where you meet weekly and you re-examine your relationship with consumption through the lens of your faith. It's called Let There Be Stuff. And we have a Christian and a Jewish version already out. We're working right now on an Islamic one, and then we're going to do the spiritual but non-denominational. We call it the Marin version. Unitarians and hippies and stuff. Because this is a really ripe place to have this conversation. There's lots of people working in the faith-based communities, and we need to look past whatever baggage we might feel about these communities to realize that they are natural allies that share so many of our values and concerns about healthy people, healthy planet, healthy communities.
Hi, I'm Mark Bowers with the City of Sunnyvale. You're addressing a group that's named the California Research and Recovery Association. And to my question, and I'll explain why, is if you could name this group, what would you name it? Back when that name was selected 30 plus years ago, resource recovery meant capturing resources and recovering them and making use of them. And then it was kind of co-opted as a term by the waste energy people. So if you could name this group anything you wanted, what would you name it?
Oh my gosh, that's a good question. I will have to think about that a little bit. Resource recovery does make me prickle a little bit because those dogs in the incinerator pusher world really have hijacked that word. Let me think about it. Let's all think about it, actually, because you guys are living this. Let's all think about that and think about what are some of the important memes or frames that would work that would instill in people's brains the kind of values that we want. You know, have you guys all read this book, Don't Think of an Elephant? If you haven't read this book, don't get this book, because if I say don't think of an elephant, what do? You think of an elephant, right? Because it's a book by George Lakoff, he's a professor at Cal, and he really studied the mental frames that we all have with certain words. And the right has become very, very skilled at doing this, is they say certain words that invoke a mental frame in our brains so that we think a certain thing without even being instructed to do so. So if they say death tax, you think, that's unfair, everybody dies, you can't tax death. Like immediately we have a repulsion against death tax. They've been very, very skillful at this, and we need to learn how to do that. There is a problem with the word zero waste, because when you go to regular people outside of this incredibly sophisticated crowd, and you say waste, what most people think of is yuck, or inevitable. There's a sense of inevitability around waste. So when you say zero and waste, it doesn't always match in people's brains. They don't know what we're talking about. And so what we need to do is practice with other terms and other frames and other memes about how we can talk about this so that people can think of zero waste as inspirational and visionary and a direction rather than like, what? What are you guys talking about? So I don't know offhand, but I will think about it, and maybe we can have a discussion on Green Yes about what are some of the other terms or frames that we can use for these issues.
Hi, Dan Noble. I'm Executive Director of the Association of Compost Producers.
Oh, thank
you. Speaking of memes, have you heard about the recent, or read the recent report called The Circular Economy?
No.
The CircularEconomy.org, I just was made aware of that last week, and I've downloaded the executive summary in the paper and promised to send it to a number of people that I've talked to about that. Actually, I became aware of that term when I was teaching environmental studies in the 1970s, because it was coined by Eugene Odom in the back of his environmental studies section of his basic ecology text. But now the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has done a major study, and it's in this paper, and it's free to download at the CircularEconomy.org. So I'm sharing that with the haulers and composters that I work with, because I think there's a new economic paradigm. The other thing that I would maybe take some issue with what you said about economic growth, but also maybe offer some new memes about that. One of the economists had said I can't remember who it was attributable to, but there's really 3 or more economies layered on top of each other. There's the proton economy, which is about mass, which is the stuff and materials that we're dealing with. There's the electron economy, which is really the energy economy, where we're looking to convert that from non-renewable to renewable. Renewable electrons versus non-renewable. And then there's the photon economy, which is everything we're doing here, which is about information. And that money doesn't follow the first law of thermodynamics. Or the second law, it actually expands continuously. Because money is non-material, money is informational. It's just, the numbers in our bank account, right? And we've got plenty of storage information in the cloud to store all of that information. So about exchanging value without exchanging stuff, which we're doing here today.